Hey, welcome back. Yvonne Wakefield's YouTube channel. We are on book 3 of my 3-book series about this log cabin I built in the wilderness when I was 18, just like a couple years ago. Anyway, I introduced book 3 last week, and it's not as sequential, timeline-wise, as the other 2 books. I add in vignettes and things that didn't make it into the flow of these books. And in this book, Babe in the Woods, Path of Totality, also takes you up to date. But one of the things I did not include in this book, which happened during that time frame, and I wrote a short story about it and shared it with my writers group the other night. It's called The Episodic Fly Strip. And Arturo is going to put some of these pictures up, but one night I got to the cabin kind of late, and I had another dog, Calvin, and went to sleep, and all of a sudden in the middle of the night there was this big boom, and the dog starts barking and all this stuff. Well, a great horned owl flew in through the window, and this was what I found out later. A pack rat had been coming across the windowsill. A great horned owl came in, got the pack rat, and then what I didn't find out until the next day is I had just come back and hadn't cleaned up the cabin that night. There was a fly strip up there. So eventually, I ended up sleeping in my truck that night where the owl flew all around the cabin. And in the morning, I drove downtown. This is before cell phones, and used the neighbor's phone, and the Fish and Wildlife came up. And we found out that the owl had gotten his tail feathers stuck in this fly strip. So long story short, he was taken downtown, he was cleaned up, the fly strip was taken out, and the wildlife agent came back up with him. And I'm 5 feet, then I was 5'2", and the wingspan of this owl was 4 feet 6 inches. So this guy reached out. So the wildlife agent had washed him up, and he was really great. He gave him some London broil steak, and we put him back up in a tree with some London broil steak, and by the morning he was gone. So that's kind of the story. One of the little vignettes I wanted to share with you. So last week I just talked about the book, how it's broken up into 3 sections, and it takes you from, I think I was in my 30s, and it'll take you to the present time. So tonight, the chapter I'm going to read is called Whose Fault? And it talks about also when I was a student in Mendocino, California, which I'm going to tell you now, I just was given a mini retrospective at the Mendocino Art Center where I was a student a while ago. It'll be in July, and I'll give you a little bit more information on that next time. But so Whose Fault starts out where I'm in Mendocino because I would be there being a student, and then in the springtime, I would go spend summers at the cabin where I didn't have to pay rent. So Mendocino, California, if anybody doesn't know, it's literally right on the bluffs of Northern California. And my apartment was less than 2 blocks from the ocean, and you could actually feel the ocean when it crashed. So whose fault? After building my log cabin in 1975, I split 6 consecutive summers living there alone, after first living in a leaky trailer in Collegiate Eugene, Oregon, then in a studio apartment in artsy Mendocino, California. During these academic seasons, I completed a 3-year certificate at the Mendocino Art Center's Fine Arts program and a BA at Antioch University in San Francisco. With 2 diplomas in hand, I was hired as a seasonal arts administrator, a job allowing me to spend June, July, and August on the mountain. Before returning one late spring, I acquired a companion for Arthur, my 8-pound rat terrier, named after my dead father, though the 2 bore absolutely no resemblance. Mary Alice, a bird-boned black miniature poodle, had been abandoned under a mildewy porch. I named the 6-week-old pup after my own mother, who had also left me at a young age, though not on purpose, like that pup's bitch had. Though they would never measure up to a pair of supportive parents, Arthur and Mary Alice were barky, wagtail, wagging kindred shoring up my lack of a two-legged clan. In Mendocino, while I was working a 9-to-5 shift in an office, modeling in the evenings for drawing classes, and gardening for an elderly couple on the weekends, Arthur and Mary Alice were confined to my one-room apartment in a 2-story complex with a no-pet policy, which I managed to flip in our favor. One foggy morning, I wake with a parched throat, holding in words to the premonition that had shaken me from sleep. Today's the big one. As I bolt upright and tear back the covers, both dogs kerplunk off the single bed we share and stare up at me as I repeat, today is the big one. The San Andreas Fault runs parallel to the Sandstones Bluffs, a skip and jump away from my apartment. Premonitions about it cracking wide open had been fracturing my dreams for hours. Subliminally, I'd seen the coastline peel apart like a layer cake and tumble into the Pacific Ocean just beyond my window. Once I am clearly awake and brushing my teeth besides my stupefied reflection in the mirror, I see that my slumbering images would materialize later in the day, and I have to drive inland to avoid being swallowed by an earthquake. As a native Californian, I'd felt the fault line let out an occasional earth-shaking burp. When it did so at night, dozing humans woke to aftershocks, causing lovers to wonder, did we climax again in our sleep? But today, at some point, that tectonic plate was going to unleash her full force, shattering ceilings and floors, toppling shelves and palomores sleeping in. I just want to interject here. I grew up my first years in California, and the day I received my first communion, we were living in Los Gatos, and I received my first communion, and I had to take like a little nap before the big lunch you were taking out to. Well, I laid down and there was an earthquake, and I got so scared I jumped up and I got a bloody nose, and I was sure that was because I was getting thrown out of. God was showing me that you should not be a little child bride of Christ. It freaked me out for a long time. So back to this. Today, the big one would wake. I hurriedly dress and lace on running shoes, though I am in no shape to outrun an earthquake. Filling my orange knapsack with a bag of food, dog food, a partially eaten brick of Tillamook cheese, apples, a jar of Taster's Choice instant coffee, a few toiletries, and any cash on hand, I wedged the bulky pack between 2 full water jugs and 1 5-gallon can of gasoline, always in the back of the truck, close the camper hatch, and take off running. Arthur and Mary Alice bound by my heels as I hot-footed through the weather-beaten village to warn the Rices. Ray and Miriam Rice in Mendocino were like another older couple, Dale and Annabelle Tayton, who were always helping me out at the cabin. Like them, the Rices were also unconditionally available to help me out as a young artist. They had been 2 of my teachers in painting and sculpture when I was a student at the Mendocino Art Center, and I lived just across the street from my studio apartment. Nonsense, Ray replies in a firm, fatherly, yet friendly voice when he opens his door to discover a babbling doomsday prophet on the threshold. Gasping for words, I inform him of the impending earthquake and outline my dream, including the part about how the ocean bluff upon which his house was built was about to snap off. Life, as he knew it, would be sleeping with the fishes. Nonsense, he repeats, the twinkle in his eyes negating the sternness in a voice he was trying not to blow with laughter. The earthquake is inside of you. Get centered, he advises, along with extending an invitation to join him for a cup of chamomile tea. I decline and call in sick at the office. I could not run away from the approaching earthquake, but I could outdrive it. With the dogs riding shotgun on the bench seat, I head inland to the coastal redwood forest. We would be safe there. With no buildings around, the only things to fall would be needles and boughs. With enough food and water for days, there was time for the earth to settle, then for me to head on to the cabin's high-altitude safety. While we bide our time, the dogs splash through pooling shadows and sun puddles. I walk in circles, figure eights, pausing only to tilt my head and look up into the redwood crowns until I can no longer single out one tree. In that concentrated moment, I felt the forest fuse into one organism, or the soul of the whole, as Emerson called it. Keeping my face skyward, I repeat over and over, soul of the whole, until the earthquake returns to a dream. I wish Ray Rice was at the cabin to remind me, nonsense, the earthquake is inside of you. Get centered, because I am as discombobulated as the weather. 4 nights in a row, tectonic forces shifted not geological plates, but atmospheric strata. Instead of the earth potentially cracking below my feet, the sky was cracking overhead. Each night stages a new tempest performance, the forest shaking as the sky beats out a rib cage rattling rock and roll. Thunder rattles window glass and resounds in the log walls, scaring my dogs and me so badly we'd be under the bed if I slept on a framed spring mattress instead of a foam topper on a pine plank floor. Even the carpenter ants were afraid to come out. Not a bug stirred during 4 mousy gray days and black as mulehide nights whipped by lightning. The dogs sleep on an old Pendleton blanket folded into a crib beside the wood-burning stove. The first stormy night sent them whimpering and shaking, so I held them in my lap as I tried to read. By bedtime, it was clear all of us were unnerved and needing comfort of the others. In the order in which they entered my life, I carried Arthur, then Mary Alice, up into the loft ladder, where they nested inside my own trough of blankets. A copy of Native Son by Richard Wright was on a bookshelf within arm's reach. I crack open the musty paperback to a section bookmarked by a dried brown fiddlehead-tipped fern. 2 paragraphs in, lightning strikes so close the smell of ozone seeps through the windowsills and chinking. Fearing a strike could charge the nearby stovepipe, I moved the mattress to the middle of the loft, the dogs gliding along like they're riding on a magic carpet. Propped on my elbow, I get back to reading by kerosene lamplight. It was the part where Bigger Thomas figures he has to hack the head off the drunken woman he'd smothered to death with a pillow. If not decapitated, he could not fit her body into the basement furnace. I closed the book on this scene as I must have done before. Living alone in the wilderness has taught me to avoid anything negative or frightening that could be reimagined. Pages detailing blood and burning skin and bones prompt me to reposition the bedding. If the stovepipe was hit by lightning, it might discharge volts enough to render my body into that of the fictional, incinerated Mary Dalton. In the morning, clouds are rolling and rebounding in the sky like steelies, and pine needles pierce pollen-frosted rain pools. The wind has calmed and carries the smell of lightning-struck fires. 6 at least, a grandmother would tell me later that day. I'd gone downtown to pick up some groceries and stopped at Dale and Annabelle's house because I saw them sitting in their front yard when I drove in and knew they would still be sitting there when I headed back. I'd known them since I started building my cabin. Every finished board and rafter Dale milled at his one-man operation. As usual, their grass was mowed and flowers were regularly visited with the water hose bloomed colorfully beside knapwigs. I pull into the familiar gravel drive of the modest house where they raised a handful of kids, now with kids of their own. Hi, Yvonne. Dale and Annabelle were the first ones to use this mispronunciation, which stuck. Pull up a seat. Dale says before the cab door is even open. I walk over and settle on nylon webbing. Dale to the left and Annabelle to the right in matching lawn chairs circling a new glass-top table. We are all facing Strawberry Mountain, a snow cap sporting its pinnacle like an ice-laced mantilla. If you don't know what a mantilla is, because growing up Catholic, when we had to go to church, you had to always have something over your head. And if you didn't wear a veil, you had this like little thing like a doily. And that was called the mantilla. Well, Yvonne, looks like we're in for another good storm. Yep, I reply as I follow Dell's focus on the heavenly brouhaha witching about the sawtooth horizon. 6 lightning strikes in Malheur last night. Small fires, all of them less than half an acre, but they all mopped out by now. Annabelle's report carries in a gust of wind, and she continues, saw some lightning up your way. No smoke, though, so I knew you was okay. I look at the top of Strawberry, wondering if the snow mantle will stay through the summer temperatures. Then I lift my focus west to the bank of clouds driven by gritty winds, causing the 3 of us to shield our eyes in unison. Getting up the mountain before the rain in those clouds turns the road slick is my new priority. But urgency is not in Dale and Annabelle's dictionary, because I never saw one in their house or any book except the telephone book shelved by their knickknacks. Their wealth of knowledge is stacked in their hearts and kindly referenced. Well, Yvonne, what you been up to? Dale leans back in the chair, though not enough to tip over. Oh, buzzing up some trees I felled last spring, splitting wood. How's your saw cutting? Like butter, I reply. Like what? It's dull. I have a file, but I can't find my rake. And for you, of you who haven't sharpened a chainsaw, a rake is like a little guide that you put on the teeth and use it along with a bastard file. What size is your teeth? Same as yours. You sure? Aren't all chains the same? Dale shrugs, gets up, and without any further exchange, walks to the back of his pickup. Annabelle stays put, sucking her lip over her lower teeth and rubbing her breast, actually the area where it had been operated clean. Cancer scared her so bad she quit cigarettes. Cold turkey. Hardest thing I ever done, she told me months after the surgery. She kept her promise, even lettering a no smoking inside sign and taping it to the brushed aluminum framed screen door. Dale returns with the chain and drops it on the glass top table. Your teeth this size? I eyeball the greasy links and in all honesty declare, I don't know. And the discussion of chainsaw teeth stops right there. Looks like the storm's picking up. Uh-huh. Annabelle and I agree in unison. Can smell the rain a-coming. Uh-huh. I affirm her observation, breathing in the imminent cloudburst. What size of file you use? Dale asked, steering the conversations back to the chainsaw teeth, by then nearly the last thing on my mind. A round one. Same size as yours, I guess. What fit in these teeth? Dale pushes the chain, the color of the sky, closer. I run a finger inside the steely smile to assess whether it's the same gap as my chainsaw. I don't know. By now, the approaching storm makes the barometer drop low, and sprinkles make us shiver in our summer wear. Although it has just begun to spit down here, it is pouring up at the cabin. I'm pushing in my chair to leave when Dale says excitedly, Wait a minute, Yvonne. I know where there's a chain for your saw. He pounds the table with a hand minus a finger lost to his sawmill and drives away in his Ford truck. Chances are he'll return with the chain, not a new one, but an old one freshly raked and sharpened. This would replace the chain I'd run into the ground a few too many times while bucking firewood, dulling encounters earning the chain the name of Butter Cutter. Maybe we should go inside and take this tabletop with us so it won't blow off, I say to Annabelle as we both semi-lean over it to keep it from blowing up and crashing down, just like the popular limbs breaking off trees. Okay, Yvonne, just a minute, says Annabelle before ducking her head under the table. The snap I hear must have come from her pinching off a nappy head. Weed my ass. It was the click of a cricket, and Annabelle resurfaces, puffing on a cigarette and pocketing the blue plastic lighter. Her turkey must have not gotten that cold, and Annabelle didn't want Dell to know it. That's why she waited until he left to imbibe in the cigarette taken out of her house dress deep, poofy side pocket, where it stayed undetected until she could cook her goose in private. After Annabelle snubs out her butt and places it along with other filter tips beneath the garden bed rock, we hoist the glass top jib and jibe it across the lawn, then slide it in sideways through the back kitchen door. By now, the cacophony outside threatens to pale the 1812 overture, turned up on full volume. I knew it was rude to leave before Dell returned with the chain, but wanting to get to the cabin before the storm's next movement, I leave Annabelle on a final note. Gotta go, bye, as she gums a stick of Wrigley spearmint. You be careful, Yvonne, she says as the hinges on the screen door bend backward from the same wind that slams against my truck door. Driving west, Strawberry Mountain is covered by this same thunder cap that bears upon Canyon Mountain. By the time 3 kerosene lamps were lit, that bear was in full rampage. But I would not let it get inside, where I was getting centered, on a foam mattress. All right, that concludes tonight's chapter. So again, if you get a chance to listen to a professional reader, not somebody like me who kind of dips and digs in through it, Kay Webster has narrated all of these books on audio. You can get all these books wherever you want. And we got Zachary here. Teddy's at his other friend's house. We get a picture of Zachary. He's getting old. So we will see you next week. Hope you enjoyed tonight. And remember, stay hydrated. Bye-bye.